Hello, and welcome to the Illinois Power Agency's webinar on the Equity Accountability System and Storage Procurements. This webinar is meant to help entities interested in participating in storage procurements better understand the Equity Accountability System and the equity requirements the projects will have. My name is Emily Asbury. I am the Procurement Programs Equity Specialist at the IPA.
And I'm Ella Johnson-McGowan, the Equity Policy and Data Manager here at the IPA.
Okay, and now to go over the agenda for today. Today, we're going to go over the legislation that led to these equity requirements. We will then review the Minimum Equity Standard, or MES, how to comply with the MES, the Energy Workforce Equity Portal, compliance materials, MES waivers, and additional resources. Next slide, please. This webinar is specifically designed to discuss requirements for utility-scale storage suppliers. We will not be discussing utility-scale wind or solar, Illinois Shines, or Illinois Solar for All. If you would like more information on those programs, please visit the IPA's website. Now to discuss the background. The Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, or CEJA, was signed into law in September 2021. The passage of CEJA created the Equity Accountability System, or EAS, that aims to give historically excluded populations and populations that have been subject to disproportionate levels of pollution access to the clean energy economy. Within the context of energy storage procurements, the EAS includes the establishment of a minimum equity standard, or MES, for storage projects. It also includes a prioritization of bids within competitive procurements. Next slide, please. The Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, or CERJA, was signed into law in January 2026 and took effect on June 1st, 2026. CERJA requires that all storage projects procured by the IPA are compliant with the MES. CERJA also notes that a prioritization of bids within competitive procurements can be made to center equity. For the initial August 2026 procurement, energy transition grant community areas will be used as a tiebreaker, meaning between two projects that submit the same strike price, the project located in an energy transition grant community will be selected over the project that is not located in that community. Different prioritization mechanisms may be used in the future, so always be sure to check the RFP requirements before each procurement. Next, we're going to talk about what the MES is. The Minimum Equity Standard, or MES, is the minimum percentage of your project workforce that consists of equity-eligible persons, or EEPs. I know it's a lot of acronyms, but we'll make sure to repeat them several times. So what is an EEP? If you look at the right hand of the slide, you'll see that there's 4 different criteria that can make a person eligible to be an EEP. First, if they are a graduate or participant in any of the qualifying training programs. Please use this link to see what those qualifying programs are. Second, persons who are graduates or currently enrolled in the foster care system. Third, persons who are formerly incarcerated. Or lastly, persons who reside in an equity investment eligible community, or EIEC. We'll have a link to the map of EICs later in the presentation. For storage procurements, the MES is set at 10% for the first procurement in August 2026. This means that 10% of your project workforce must consist of EEPs. For example, if you had a project workforce of 100 employees, 10 of those employees must be registered as EEPs. MES requirements for the project are tied to the contract it is under. So even if the work spans multiple years, the MES percentage for the specific project will remain the same. The MES percentage will increase in subsequent years, so projects that win future contracts may have a higher MES percentage requirement. Next slide, please. Who makes up the project workforce? We keep using this term, project workforce, but what does that actually mean? The project workforce consists of employees, contractors and their employees, and subcontractors and their employees. It includes anyone whose work is directly or substantially related to the development, construction, and operation of the project that is participating. As well as construction, this also includes administration, sales, marketing, and technical roles. The work must be physically performed in Illinois to count towards the project workforce. For example, if an employee was physically located in Texas but was doing admin work for the participating project, they would not count towards the project workforce. But if an employee was physically located in Illinois doing admin work for this project, they would count toward the project workforce. Next slide, please. This is a helpful graphic to visualize the different components of the EAS. The EAS is the large umbrella that all of these requirements fall under. The MES is a requirement that a certain percentage of the project workforce consists of EEPs. So you can see in this graphic, the number of individual EEPs is what count towards the overall goal of MES compliance. Now we're going to discuss the details of how to comply with the MES. As stated earlier, the current MES requirement is 10%. That means that 10% of your project workforce must consist of EEPs. Across MES and other programs, we found that oftentimes a company will already have EEPs on staff. For example, maybe they have employees that live in an EIEC. But keep in mind, in order to count towards the MES, the EEP has to be registered. We encourage you to start accounting for EEPs in your staff as soon as possible. Waiting until right before the MES report is due often results in delays and confusion. Sellers can also find EEPs looking for employment on the equity portal, which we will discuss more in depth later. Next slide, please. The year-end report section of the MES combined report is backward-looking. In this section, you will provide the full names of EEPs in your workforce. In order to count towards the MES, EEPs must be registered. There are two options for registering EEPs. EEPs can register themselves on the Energy Workforce Equity Portal, which we will talk more about later on. The second option is the seller collects EEP attestations and provides necessary documentation. We'll go a little more in depth on this process later. Next slide. Certain EEP criteria requires documentation in order to be registered. For EEPs that qualify by living in an EIEC, they need documentation showing residency. It must be one of the following: a driver's license, state ID, utility bill, pay stub, mortgage agreement, or lease. For EEPs that qualify by being a graduate or participant in an eligible training program, they must show proof of enrollment. This can be a certificate or communication from the organizer. If an EEP registers themselves on the Energy Equity Portal, they can upload this documentation themselves. If the seller is registering the EEP via their MES report, they need to include documentation as well as the signed EEP attestation in their submission. Next slide, please. MES reporting consists of an initial first compliance plan, then annual reporting twice a year. One report is midway through the delivery year in December, and in July, one delivery year ends and the next begins. Next slide, please. The first compliance plan. The first compliance plan is due 30 days post-contracting. This plan outlines how you intend to comply with the MES. The information collected includes narratives about how the seller intends to meet the MES, the projected workforce information numbers, seller information, and plans for outreach. Next slide, please. Every December, sellers submit a mid-year report. In this report, sellers can communicate how they are progressing in meeting the MES. If they are having any difficulties in meeting the MES, the IPA will reach out with further resources. Next slide, please. Every July, sellers will submit a combined MES report. This report has two sections. The backward-looking year-end report is where the seller provides all of the information and documentation of EEPs. This section is where sellers give the actual numbers for the previous delivery year. It also has a forward-looking compliance plan. Much like the first compliance plan, this section shows how the seller will comply with the MES the following delivery year. Now I'll pass it over to Ella.
Great, thanks, Emily. Now we're going to move into learning more about the Energy Workforce Equity Portal and how it can be used as a tool to meet the minimum equity standard. The Energy Workforce Equity Portal, which we sometimes refer to as the Equity Portal, serves many functions. Entities like yourselves can register to become a clean energy company in the portal, which gives you access to post any available clean energy jobs you may have. The job board on this equity portal is primarily viewed by EEPs who are registered in the equity portal, as they are given a link to these resources upon registering. For a detailed walkthrough on how to register and post jobs in the equity portal, a video tutorial is available at the link on the bottom of this page. One major tool located on the equity portal is the EEP registration. Employees can register to become an EEP, or employers can register on their behalf. Registering on the equity portal is quicker than registering through the year-end report process and takes the burden off the employers for keeping this list of registered EEPs up to date. EEPs can register themselves directly, and in some cases, this may be the easiest route to registration. However, allowing employers to register on their employees' behalf gives the company more flexibility for how they track EEP registration and when they register their employees. To register on behalf of your employees, you will need an attestation form that is signed by the employee and proof of qualification criteria as discussed earlier. This tool, also located on the equity portal, is the EIEC map, or Equity Investment Eligible Community map. This helps prospective EEPs and companies determine if an individual qualifies to be an EEP based on their residency in an equity investment eligible community. To use the tool, you just enter the address of the EEP registrant, and the map will tell you if you qualify or not. One thing to note is zip codes are not sufficient for you, and you must put the full address of the EEP applicant in. Once qualification is confirmed, you can proceed with registering an EEP under residency in an equity investment eligible community. The data on this map can also be downloaded and used to identify addresses that are in EIEC areas. Once your company submits their MES reports, whether that's an initial compliance plan, combined MES report, or mid-year report, the IPA has specific standards we're checking for when assessing compliance with the MES. When we're reviewing these reports, the resulting actions typically fall into three buckets. If a seller's report is complete with all required information and demonstrates compliance with the MES, the seller will be notified of their compliance and no further action is needed. The report is missing information, has contradictory information, or a follow-up is required, the IPA will reach out to the seller with the request for more information and provide a due date by which the information needs to be submitted. After that point, disciplinary action may follow if the report continues deficiency. Consequences of non-compliance with the MES. If it's clear from the report that compliance with the MES was not met, the seller will receive a notice of potential violation or an NOPV, in which the seller has a time period to cure the situation prior to being suspended from future procurement events. One other pathway to curing non-compliance with the MES is requesting a waiver, which we'll talk about next. If your company is unable to meet the MES, we do have a waiver process that could be an option. However, waivers being granted are extremely rare. To even be considered for a waiver, a seller must be actively working to achieve compliance with the MES throughout the delivery year, submit all required MES reports, and make clear attempts to meet the MES and while being granted a waiver is rare, let's go over the requirements for how to submit one. The applicant must provide evidence of significant due diligence toward meeting the MES, including all of the following: a narrative description of the company's efforts to procure EEPs, which includes activities such as working with job training and workforce development programs, maintaining applications of individuals not selected for an opening, and participating in job fairs related to local community events. Also, evidence of efforts to work with equity eligible contractors, like communication with CBOs or training programs, workforce hubs, union halls, etc. This evidence should include the date of contact, the agency official, and the title of the individual contacted. Additionally, advertising or solicitation using different platforms, sites, alumni associations, and social media pages. And finally, evidence that the company posted all solicitations on state agency websites and through targeted email alerts to individuals registered with the state agencies to learn of these opportunities. As mentioned before, failing to comply with the MES could put your company in jeopardy of being suspended from future IPA procurements. If in the rare case a waiver is granted, it is granted for 1 year only on a project level basis. After a waiver is granted on a specific project, that project is expected to come into compliance with the MES in the years following. Lastly, we wanted to share a few links to resources that may be helpful in educating yourselves further with the minimum equity standard and how it applies to storage procurements at the IPA. We're always available to answer any questions you may have and can be contacted at illinois.storage@illinois.gov or at ipa.energyequity@illinois.gov. Thank you all. We look forward to working with you.